I studied pleasure as a biological mechanism, and the intense pleasure that's associated with joy and enthusiasm. So enthusiasm is to be filled with God, theos, and theos. It's to be filled with the Spirit of God. You do not experience joy as a consequence of achieving a goal. You experience joy as a consequence of positing a goal and then noting progress towards the goal. And so a corollary of that is that the higher the goal, the more intense the joy attendant on observation of progress towards it. And so then you might say, if you wanted to maximize the possibility of hedonic expression, not to degenerate into a cheap hedonism, but to maximize it in the most real sense, and this is a Viktor Frankl idea in some fundamental senses, you pick the most noble possible goal. And that's the mountain, that's service to God, again, by definition, right? Because it's service to the highest thing, whatever that is. And then that opens the door, that does literally open the door to it's a precondition for the experience of joy. And so these people who are depressed and anxious and miserable, part of the reason for that is that their ethic is scattered. Their goals are diverse and low level. There's nothing beckoning in the distance. And so they can't see progress because there's no progress, and certainly not progress to a superordinate goal. So there's actually no positive emotion. And that's technically the case, because the positive emotion system is a calibration system that produces navigation orientation towards a destination point. That's literally how it functions. So
I think you just described the whole book of Exodus just right there. Like that's
right.
Really what Exodus is.
Right. Well, that's
like
the journey
this
to the promised land.
mixed multitude that is gathered into, and you can experience that in yourself as much as in a people or in anything actually functions that way.
And
anything you can identify.
Where there is no vision of people perish.
Right,
exactly. Where other cultural norms are so degraded.
It's also the danger of dispensing with an ideal, because the problem with ideals is that every ideal is a judge. So the ideal of beauty is a judge, because who of us compares to the ideal beauty? And the answer is no one, and we all know it. And so the ideal is a catastrophe in that sense.
It's a raging fire that can consume you.
Yes, exactly. But if there's no ideal, there's no goal. And if there's no goal, then there's no joy. And so what are we going to do? We're going to dispense with our ideals so we don't hurt anybody's feelings. And what we're going to dispense, well, that's exactly what we're being called upon to do. And so we're going to abandon joy. And unless you have the ultimately judgmental ideal, it's so perverse. Unless you have the ultimately judgmental ideal, there's no precondition for joy. God.
But back to Stephen's thing about the funeral and the reality, the history. In other words, psychology and lots of things, you can throw incredible interpretive light. But the highest thing here is that God is the actor in this, and it happens in history. So the surrounding nations, all their festivals were festivals of nature, spring and so on. The Jewish festivals are festivals of history. And they're taught to follow them as if they were there, maybe centuries later. In other words, you've got to keep always that history is the decisive thing here, and in light of history, you bring in psychology. I happen to be trained sociology, bring it in. But history and meeting God, you're into pretty heavy philosophy. Yeah.